Math 12A, I want to just really quickly go over the homework because, as someone pointed out, there are no answers in the back of the book. So I went over yesterday sort of what you should be doing for those ones. But for the ones I gave you for homework yesterday, I gave you number 4. There was only 3 of them, so it won't take long. I gave you number 4, which said the vertices of a triangle are 2 and 6. So 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They are 2 and 6, which is point K. And lost my place. 4 and 10. Oh, well, that's not helpful. Let me redo this because that's not helpful. I gotta make my spaces smaller. Let's do that again. So let's say 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Let's say that's 2 and 6, which is K. And then 4 and 10. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So let's say that's 4 and 10. Why do they pick those numbers? It's crazy. L, and then M is 8 and negative 2. So 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 1, 2. 8 and negative 2, that is M. So we have this. All right. Now, what does it want us to do? It says let the midpoint of KL be Q. So the midpoint from K, which is this one, to L, which is this one. So this is point Q, because that's K. So that's point Q. That is the midpoint. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to figure out what point Q is. So point Q is, I got to figure out the x. So I'm going to add the x's together, 4 plus 2, and divide it by 2. And for the y's, I'm going to add those together, 10 plus 6 and divide it by 2. So 4 plus 2 is 6, divided by 2 is 3, and 10 plus 6 is 16. 16 divided by 2 is 8. So it should be at 3 and 8. So point Q is at 3 and 8. And then they said, oh, I apologize. You're probably yelling at me right now. It says let P be the midpoint. I didn't read it. I was reading fast. That's what happens when you read too fast. I just did what I tell you guys not to do. Q is the midpoint between L and M. So Q is actually like here somewhere. This is point Q. So again, I'm going to figure out where that is. Point Q, I'm going to add my x's together. 4 plus 8 divided by 2. And for my y's, 10 plus negative 2. And I'm going to divide by 2. So 4 plus 8 is 12. Divided by 2 is 6. And 10 plus negative 2 is 8. Divided by 2 is 4. Now again, when I graph it, it should kind of make sense where it is. And that does make sense. Over 6, up 4. That does make sense based on my triangle. Now it says show that PQ is parallel to KM. Show that PQ is parallel, that's the symbol for parallel, to KM. So I'm showing that if I joined the line of my 2 midpoints, I'm showing that this line is parallel to this one. So parallel means that the slopes are the same. So I'm going to find the slope for PQ, which is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So y2 minus y1. So let's say that's 8 minus 4 over 3 minus 6. So 8 take away 4 is 4. 3 take away 6 is negative 3. So I get that the slope for PQ is negative 4 over 3. So now I'm going to find the slope for KM, which again, y2 minus, y1, and x2 minus x1. So 6 take away negative 2 over 2 take away 8. So 6 take away negative 2 is 8. 2 take away 8 is negative 6, which reduces to negative 4 over 3. So, whoops, so I got the same slope no matter what. Rolly came up to visit. He was at my feet. I almost stepped on him. All right, so that's number 4. Then I got you to do number 6. So for number 6, what you should do, I can talk you probably through this one. It says you have a parallelogram. So you have some kind of 4-sided shape, okay? And then it says show that they're diagonals. So a line going from one corner to the other and a line going from the other corner to the other. Show that they bisect each other. All you really have to do is find the midpoint for this one and the midpoint for this one. They should be the same. If they are, you did it right. If they aren't, you did it wrong. All right, and so what you should have been finding was, for number 6, what you should have been finding was the midpoint of those diagonal lines. All right, and number 14. 14, you have a triangle, and they ask for several things in the triangle. So again, I'm going to probably just talk you through it because you can know whether you're right or not, because it will either work or it won't. So for number 14, I'll draw the triangle just really quickly. Negative 2 and 2. 1, 2, 1, 2. Negative 2 and 2. And that's K. 1 and 5 is L. So 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1 and 5 is L. And M is 3 and negative 3. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. That's M. Oh, stop. So I have this, okay? So again, this is just a rough sketch because I didn't do it on graph paper. But even with a rough sketch, I can kind of make some predictions here. It says verify that this triangle has a right angle. So right angles are perpendicular to one another. I think the right angle, based on my drawing, I think the right angle would be here, just based on how I have it drawn. If that's true, if these two lines, if this line and this line make a right angle, it means that those two lines are perpendicular to one another. If they are perpendicular to one another, then their slopes are negative reciprocals to one another. So I would find the slope of KL and I would find the slope of KM. So if KL worked out to be 1/2, then KM should work out to be negative 2 over 1. I think I switched the signs on that. So it should be opposite signs and flipped over. If it doesn't work out to be that, then you did something wrong. Part B says the midpoint of the hypotenuse. Well, again, if I have this drawn correctly, the hypotenuse would be this side. So the midpoint, we'll call it N, for lack of a better thing. That is the midpoint, is the same distance from each vertex. So what they mean by that is the distance from N to L, so the length of that line. So I would use my length of the line formula, the square root of x2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared. I would use that formula. I would figure out what is the length from here to L. How long is that? Then I would find the length from N to M. So I would find this length, I would find this length, and the other vertex is over here. So I would find the length from N to K. So again, I need to figure out what that point N is. So I need to find out the midpoint between L and M. And then once I know where that is, and it would be 1 plus 3 is 4 divided by 2 is 2, and 5 plus negative 3 is 2 divided by 2. It would be at 2 and 1. So I would use this point and put it into my length formula, figure out that. I would use 2 and 1 and 3 and -3, do my length formula, figure out the length there. And then I would use -2 and 2 and 2 and 1, figure out my length formula there. All the lengths should end up being the same. If they don't, you did something wrong. Go back and see if you can figure that out. A lot of times what people do wrong is when they do, say, x2 minus x1. If I were to do x2 minus x1 here, I would do 2 take away 3. What I see a lot of people do, though, is they go 2 minus 1. That's not an x. That's not x2 minus x1, because that's not an x. That's a y. It's x2 minus x1, or x2 minus x1. So just be sure that you've got the right values in the right spots. So that really was your homework. So I want to go into the next section, which is it's a lot easier. The next section builds on this idea of a midpoint in a way. So what it talks about is if you have a line, okay, if you find the midpoint, if you find the middle, what you're actually doing is you're dividing that line up into 2 equal pieces. What if you want more than 2 equal pieces? Think about if you want to build a house and you want to put a set of stairs in your house. There's quite a bit of math involved in that, because first off, there are regulations, there are rules about how steep your stairs can be. There's rules about that for insurance purposes. There are also rules about how high a step has to be and how deep a step has to be. There are regulations for that. And you have to do the math carefully, because if you don't, what you end up with is your stairs are different heights, and brains don't handle that and feet don't handle that very well. And you end up tripping up a step. I don't know if you've ever been somewhere where the steps are a little uneven. Maybe it's an older set of stairs and they're worn a little bit, and so one step maybe is shorter than the other one or something. In my first house that I lived in, going down the steps, it went down, but then it curved. But the way it curved, and the way the builder was my uncle, so I can blame him. The way it curved, the steps actually got really narrow at one end. I fell down those stairs, I don't know how many times, because they weren't uniform. So when we say make a set of stairs, if we say, listen, from this floor to this floor, I want to have 10 steps, you actually have to figure out what is the distance at this angle, and you would know what angle you want to make the stairs at. And again, there are regulations about that. It has to be within a certain degree, because if you make them too steep, again, that makes it difficult to climb up. It makes it almost more like a ladder. I have that in my garage. Down at the end of my driveway, I have a big freestanding 2-story garage that the people who were here before built. It was a really old guy who built it, and he just kind of threw it together at the last minute, I think. And the stairs are so steep, they're more like a ladder than a set of stairs, and I hate them. I won't go up them. My husband wants to rip it out, but if we rip it out, the stairs have to start further back, because we need a lot longer span to go up, so that we don't kill ourselves going up and down the steps. It's not bad going up, but if you're trying to get something out of the second floor and you have to carry it down the stairs, it becomes a real problem, especially if you're trying to carry like a big saw, which I had to do once with him, a big ceramic tile wet saw that was absolutely huge and weighed a lot. And we had to carry it down those stairs, and I almost died. It wasn't fun. So what we're talking about is breaking lines up into a specific amount. Now, with midpoints, we're actually breaking it up into 2 pieces. So remember, what we did was we took one end and we added it to the other end. We did x1 plus x2, and we divided it by 2. Now, the reason we did that is because we were dividing it up into 2 equal pieces. But what if you want more than that? The math actually is not all that hard. So we're going to do just 2 examples, and honestly, they are fast. I don't do it exactly like the textbook does it. I like to do it in what to me is a little bit more logical manner, but I'm on example 1 on page 466 in your textbooks, which says, determine the coordinates of the points that divide the line segment joining the point -3 and 6. I'm going to need some space here. -3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. -3 and 6, they call that point A. And 7 and -9. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 7 and -9. So what they're saying is if you have this line and you want to divide the line into 5 congruent parts, you want to make it so that there are 5, if you want, steps or pieces to this. Let me see, I would have to do 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, those aren't equal because I can't draw, but let's pretend that those are equal pieces, all right? There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 equal pieces, but how many points do I have? I actually have 1, 2, 3, 4 points. I'm looking for where should those points be. So if I'm breaking it up into 5 equal parts, I'm looking for 4 points. If I'm breaking it up into 7 parts, I'll be looking for 6 points. Do you see how that works? All right. So how do I do this? There's actually a pretty easy way to do this. Now remember, I want to break this up into 5 parts. Now remember what we did when we were finding the midpoint was we added the x's together and we divided by 2 when we were finding the midpoint because we were making 2 equal parts. Well, we're going to do something very similar with this. So we're going to look at it separately, x's and then y's. So for x's, what I want to know is how far is it from -3 to 7? Now what you actually do with that is you actually subtract. You do 7 take away -3. Now the reason why I put absolute value signs there is if it so happened, if you did it the other way, if you did -3 take away 7, here you end up with +10, here you end up with -10. I don't care whether you end up with a positive or a negative number, just assume it's positive, just take the positive. So it doesn't matter whether you put this one first or this one first, the answer is 10, all right? So there are 10 spaces between the -3 and the 7. There are 10 spaces. Now we want to divide that up. We want to divide that up into 5 equal parts. Well, 10 divided by 5 is 2. What that means is there is a difference of 2 in between each point. So, and you have to look at what way am I going, because do I add 2 or do I subtract 2? I get that question on this section all the time. The answer is, it depends. If I start from here and I'm going from -3 and I need to end up at +7, well, that's going in the forward direction from -3 to 7. So I'm going to add 2. But if I was thinking this is my start point and I want to end up back here, I'm going from 7 to -3, so I'm going backwards, so I would subtract 2. So really it just depends. So I'm going to go forwards because that just makes sense to me. So from -3, if I add 2, -3 plus 2 is -1. So this point, the x value should be -1. Now if I add 2, see, I know I already have this kind of in an awkward position. If I add 2, -1 plus 2 is 1. Now if I add 2 again, 1 plus 2 is 3. And if I add 2 again, 3 plus 2 is 5. Now watch. If I've done this right, when I add 2, I'll end up here. 5 plus 2 is in fact 7. It worked out. All right, so I figured out the x's. Now I'm going to do the y's. And again, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to subtract my y's, and it doesn't matter which one is first and which one is second. So I'm going to do 6 take away -9, which is going to give me 15. Now I want to divide that up into 5 equal parts. So that's 3. So what that tells me is I have to change my y values by 3 as I move along. Now again, do I add or subtract? Well, depends. Here, if I think of this as my start point, I'm going from 6 down to -9, so I would subtract 3. If I was starting here, I would go up to 6 and I would add 3. Just depends. So I'm going to go down. So 6 minus 3 is 3. So I'm saying that this point right here should be -1 and 3. If I subtract 3 again, I would say 0. Okay, so 1 and 0. So clearly I have that way in the wrong spot. And then 0 take away 3 is -3. And then -3 take away 3 is -6. And again, if I've done this correctly, -6 take away 3 does bring me to -9. It works out that when I do it, I end up here. It doesn't really get any harder than that, right? It's just a matter of what's the difference between my first x and my last x, and divide it by the number of pieces that you want. So, and that will tell you what you add or subtract to your x's. Same thing with your y's. Example number 2. Example number 2 says you have a ski lift and it has 5 equally spaced support towers. So 5 equally spaced support towers. And there is a picture there where we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So they're supporting the ski lift, right? So that you have a little person sitting on the ski lift. He's kind of fallen off there, but you have a little guy going up on the ski lift. Now, from the first tower to the last, the lift goes a horizontal distance of 120 meters. So if the first tower is 0, we go 120 meters horizontally. We travel across 120 meters. So that means when he gets off, he has traveled horizontally 120 meters. And as he does that, he rises 90 meters vertically. So again, if we assume he starts at ground 0, he goes up 90 meters to the top of the hill. I don't think that's a very big hill, but anyway, maybe it's just a bunny hill. Any hill for me is bad. So it says, model the cable using the coordinates. Determine the coordinates of the cable at each support tower. All right, well, we have the beginning and we have the end. How many equal parts does that make? That makes 1, 2, 3, 4 parts. Right? When I draw that, I see that there are 4 parts there. So again, if I want to figure out the missing points here, where are those towers? I'm going to take my x values and I'm going to subtract them. So 120 minus 0. And I'm going to divide it into 4 equal parts. So 120 divided by 4 would be 30. So that means I do 0 plus 30 to get to 30. I do 30 plus 30 to get to 60. I do 60 plus 30 to get to 90. And if I've done this right, 90 plus 30 does in fact bring me to 120. It works out. So I'm going to do the same thing with the y's. It would be 90 minus 0 divided by 4. Now that one doesn't work out as nicely, unfortunately, but it is 22.5, which sucks. But anyway, I think I can handle it. So again, we're going up, so I'm going to add. So 0 plus 22.5 is 22.5. 22.5 plus 22.5 is 45. 45 plus 22.5 is 66.5, I think. Is it? Wait, I'm not sure. 67.5. I thought that 6 was wrong. 67.5, and then 67.5 plus 22.5 does in fact bring me to 90. You can check on the calculator, but it does. That's it. That's as hard as this section gets. I do find it helpful to just draw myself a little diagram. Again, visual person. So I like to draw it just so I can see, and that helps me think it through a little better. But you do what works for you, okay? You figure out what works for you and do that. There's not really a ton of work to show for this. Really, that's all the work that there is to show. There's not a lot of work to show, so for those of you who hate showing work, this is a good section for you. So we'll see you again tomorrow.